There's a lot of Buddhism for all of you to learn, and some of you are not very savvy in Buddhist philosophy. Thus, there's a stack of terminology, concepts that are Buddhistic concepts that are their way of thinking. So there's a whole terminology to get used to. It takes a bit of time to actually understand the terminology. Buddhism is the philosophy of mind, of what is mind, and what is an enlightened mind. Therefore, the philosophy is difficult for many people to comprehend simply because very few understand what an enlightened mind is and the various categories of enlightened mind. The empirical psychologists and Western philosophy, the children, their level of knowledge compared to Buddhist philosophy. There's a whole level of awareness to know about. The Bhāra Todo, this little book, this part two, in a sense, that's all it's really about, is mind. You know, in my writings, I use a small mind, small MIND, no caps, and then slash big MIND for the enlightened mind, because the mental plane is divided into two parts. One is the abstract mind, or enlightened mind, and then the other is the four subplanes of the empirical mind. And it's actually quite important to understand this distinction and then the qualities of the subplanes of mind. And you are as you think. You can also say you are as you eat, but you eat what you think. Now, last week, I went into the schools, the Buddhist schools. We went into the yoga of the highest of the yogas that was called Ati Yoga. And I pointed out that Ati Yoga relates to the type of attainment of a master of wisdom, which is a 5th degree initiate. And the Tibetans also call Ati Yoga the Dzogchen. The term Chen means great. So I'm going to read out and comment. There's a lot I actually want to get through. First of all, I'm just going to read out from Dudjom Rinpoche's book, Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism, which is what this whole Bhāra Total derives from, that particular school, his definition of Ati Yoga. The verbal definition of Ati Yoga means utmost, and also conveys the sense of supreme, best, perfect, climax, quintessence. So it's the highest of all whatever is possible to be obtained. The Sanskrit yoga means union. The Tibetan word for that is nao yo. Since it is the culmination of all yogas, it is the utmost or highest yoga. And since it is the nucleus of all aspects of the perfection stage, there's nothing else to be reached higher than Ati Yoga. It is qualified by the word great in Tibetan temple because through it, the reality unborn like the sky, which is most profound and difficult to analyze, is directly revealed. Now, the concept of sky or spaciousness, the vastness of space, that's what they're trying to convey in the nature of an enlightened mind. It's just vast, vast, vast. All is mind. And this is mind with a capital M. With reference to the ultimate truth. Now, ultimate truth, as I pointed out before, in Buddhism is called śūnyatā. It's the void, it's emptiness. And the conventional truth is samsara. It's what we live in. So with reference to the ultimate truth, objects of ideas, scrutiny, and inference are utterly contradictory because it is a quiescence of conception, elaboration, and an absence of symbolic doctrines. It does not abide in the path of verbalization and conventions and is not felt to pursue the imagination. For these reasons, if the occasion when meditative absorption in this pristine cognition or abiding mode of reality occurs, are not recognized to be the same absorption in the spiritual philosophical goal of Vedic yoga, which is effortless with respect to fundamental reality, then all that is studied pertaining to ideas and scrutiny becomes verbal chaff. Now, this concept of spontaneity, effortlessness, desireless, this is the type of mind that we have. It is this naturally present like the sky, and it's vast, vast, vast. You don't have to put any energy into thinking about it or receive the impressions. When you speak, it's like chaff. All of us are still properly working to obtain the dzogchen, this Hatha yoga, to develop it. As I said, it's really the mind of fifth degree initiate, a master of wisdom. So there's the third degree, the fourth degree, and the fifth degree. In my philosophy, I call the third degree initiate the ālayavijñāna, enlightenment. And I'll explain to you here, when we get a bit further down, something about the meaning of ālayavijñāna. And then the fourth degree initiate has obtained what's called the śūnyatā enlightenment. And then the fifth degree initiate, which is what this dzogchen is about, has obtained the dharmakaya enlightenment. And the dharmakaya, just to give you some idea, it's the mind of God in theistic terms, the logoic mind, cosmic mind. It's the mind of those entities that embody solar systems, planetary spheres, and so forth. It goes all the way to logoi that embody galaxies. And when you just repeat a word such as vast, and say 3 times, then it's level after level after level. And each level is transcendent compared to the level before. It's what I call transcendent perception. So meditation becomes apprehension of that and experiences the appraisal of it. It becomes extremely difficult even to approach the profound meaning of the abiding nature, no matter how correctly it seems to arise in the face of the intellect. In general, the path of the great perfection, as I said, the term normally used here is dzogchen, all conceptual elaborations become quiescent in the intrinsic expanse through meditative equipoise, without wavering from this disposition in which the presence of fundamental reality, the abiding nature without bondage or liberation, is established. Other than that, nothing is contrived, save that one abides constantly and naturally in the disposition of the supreme transcendence of intellect, which is free from all activities. All of the suddenly arisen stains, and the risen stains are any types of lower intellectual pursuits or emotionality or whatever, they just don't exist, period. Which appear through expressive power, just become naturally pure, naturally clear, and naturally liberated, without renunciation or antidote being applied. In the unchanging space of intrinsic awareness, the primal emptiness, in the manner of water and waves. Other than that, meditation and meditative equipoise are the labels conventionally applied to simple absorption in the intrinsic nature, just as it naturally occurs without looking elsewhere, without purposefully meditating, without being fixed in one point, without intellectualizing, without conceptualizing, without apprehending faults, without external clarifications, and without internal attainment. Therefore, the essence is emptiness, in that it is without thought or expression, signless, in that it is without a conceptualization, and aspirationalness, and that it is without exception, rejection, hope, or doubt. These 3 spheres naturally abide therein, an utterly pure character, because there's no objective reference to the three times, meaning past, present, and future, because these times come into expression with mind, with your concept of samsara, moves from the past to the future. As you can see with all of these superlatives, it's very, very difficult to explain what a fully enlightened mind is. Certainly not with words. All you can do is grasp an idea that it's nothing like what your thinking mind is like. Spaciousness, emptiness, what does that mean for all of you? But when I say it's the mind of a master of wisdom to all of you, then you have a better idea, because you know that the master of wisdom has thoughts. The master of wisdom can plan out ahead in the three times, can immediately look back thousands of years to past lives and project samskaras or images into the future. They have perfect understanding of the nature of the appearance of any manifesting phenomena. So that mind, as I call it, is dharmakaya, because they can also connect with logoic minds, or minds that are greater than them. It's all a succession of mind. And at times, the mind of, say, Sanakumara can be impressed in my mind, and in your minds, once you're cleansed of your concept of self. We're going from superlative to superlative, for which anything that comes out of the mouth just can't do it. It's like a crow speaking. But there you have it in terms of his endeavor to explain this term, ati yoga or dzogchen, or the highest realization. And the problem with also the Buddhist philosophy as a whole, they don't really get much out of these types of terminologies. So many Buddhists get the wrong idea. For instance, they think that śūnyatā, which is called emptiness, just means empty of mind, or void of this, or void of everything, or spaciousness like the sky. But it's far more than that. That's just the base substrate of what is the void, of what can be experienced. It just means that you've got the capacity to A, receive very intense energies, and B, get impressions from exalted mind states and the types of awareness associated with that. And these awarenesses are those that, for instance, relate to the formation of a world sphere, the impression of energy to form atomic substance, to cause the appearance of phenomena that we see all around us, or to cause its disappearance. All of this is but attributes of such a mind. And of course, for the empirical scientist, the concept of making, say, this vajra float in the air and then disappear and then suddenly appear over there, that's nonsensical. If you can do it, then they're looking for hidden strings and whatever, that you've played a trick on them. But for an enlightened being, to do that is just an aspect of their mind. They know the laws of appearance and disappearance of phenomena. And my book, Esoteric Cosmology and Modern Physics, explains those laws as much as words can do it, as much as I can conceive it. Incidentally, I have looked in my bundle of ebooks, and I actually do have a ebook copy of the Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's a huge book. You can add it to my lot as a to-do reading list. As you get older, you should get into it eventually. Now, this long quote has been provided because it elucidates the meaning of the natural state of mind and its intrinsic awareness found in the text of the Bhātā Toro. The three spheres of the quote refer to the Kama Dhatu, the Rupa Dhatu, and Arupa Dhatu of the desire form and formless realms, with conception of the fundamentals of the great perfection. So I've gone into these three realms in Buddhism a little bit. Of course, it's just a brief introduction, and you have to reading out of the books on Buddhism on the subject to get in-depth analysis. But they're just really referring to the enlightened aspects of those three realms. This is, again, as you can see, when one is writing a book like this on Buddhism, one has to have a very good understanding of Buddhism. And I didn't have it when I first started writing my books. My first book I wrote in Buddhism was the Ahimsa, and that was a lot of years ago now. And at that stage, I was still busy studying and pumping the Buddhist philosophy into my brain because there's such a vast amount of information to somehow try to master. And most Buddhists are only really masters of their particular branch, their particular school. They know that's philosophy, and they know basically the other philosophies, how it relates to it. So with conception to the fundamental of the great perfection, or Dzogchen, in one's mind, we can proceed with the further analysis of the text. So you need to understand this Ati Yoga, just simply the highest of the high, and whatever words you use just comes out garbled or some sort of mismatch. It doesn't really explain it, but it's the best you can do with words. Signlessness, aspirationalness, without conceptualization. What do these words mean to any of you? No images forming in your mind, and well, the images do form. The signs do appear, but they instantly recognized for what they are, because that's the nature of the enlightened mind. You don't have to use your intellect to analyze. It's just simple, instant analytical deduction in a flash of a second, in a flash of realization. And that flash of realization can be a fast duration of images. And some of you have experienced some of this state of mind. Now, we're going to the remaining portions of this particular section I've just been dealing with. So we're going on from where I finished off last time, number 11, or add in acts of rejection and acceptance with regards to their own minds, where in reality psychic existence and nirvana are inseparable. Those are the two truths. And then the finishing of that particular section is this: therefore, one should abandon all constructed teachings and all unnatural states free from activity. And by virtue of this introduction to awareness, natural liberation through naked perception, which is presented here, and natural liberation through naked perception is also technically the meaning of the word barotoro, which is presented here. One should realize all things in the context of this great natural liberation. So it is that all enlightened attributes are brought to completion within the great perfection, which is the Dzogchen, of course. And then it finishes off with the mantra Sameya, Nya, 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 which means commitment or pledge to this great perfection. Vast, vast, vast is this. And I already told you when something's repeated 3 times, it's on 3 levels of perception. And you can think of it in terms of the level of interpretation of your personality, your intellect, the way we're thinking now, the level of interpretation of your souls, which is the ālayavijñāna level, and then the level of interpretation of your monads, or the spirit aspect, which is the dharmakaya level. And each one is transcendent perceptions. Now, in writing this book here, I'm also pointing out to all of you that my interpretations of these books are really beyond what Buddhists know on the whole. They're not looking at what I'm explaining to you here. They have their conventional Buddhist mindset, and the conventional Buddhist mindset limits them to certain concepts. My books are far in advance to what Buddhists interpret. I have so many manuscripts. I have one on the Majjhimaka Karika of Nagarjuna, which I'd love to publish for Buddhists. It's on this to-do list. I may get to it 20 years from now because there's so many other things to write about. But I have to for Buddhists. Now here, we've got a list, and there's actually 5 statements. And these 5 statements relate to the qualities of the 5 Dhyāni Buddhas. And my books this is the Buddhist books, of course, are all about the attributes of the five Dhyāni Buddhas. That's the nature of the enlightened mind, or Dzogchen. It's their attributes, their qualities. In this particular Bharatara book, in part one, I give a summary of the attributes and qualities. And of course, I give more than what's in the Buddhist text because I add the esoteric philosophy as well. And then I often have to fix up Buddhist philosophy. There's so many binds, knots as it's called, in the texts, and then it all has to be unknotted. And this is needed also for yoga philosophy because there's a lot of yogis out there, and you can imagine in the Western world has got problems and psychic problems from trying to awaken Kundalini, and here we are, yet another one trying to awaken Kundalini prematurely because the teachers out there is what they're trying to teach. They're ignorant, right? But you can imagine what it was in Tibet, in India, when the yoga philosophy is just the standard fare of their religion. How many got knotted up using the texts and trying to awaken Kundalini and all the powers before they're ready for it, before they manifest the moral precepts. Therefore, the teachers, knowing that, they're not going to give in the text pure teachings and say, oh yeah, this is the way to awaken Kundalini. That means that you're going to make masses and masses of black magicians. Not I or any great one is interested in making black magicians. Therefore, the yogic texts, anything to do with yoga and meditation, it all has to be knotted, all has to be veiled, so that these individuals can't get the true teachings. They need an enlightened preceptor to unveil it, unknot it. And it's the same, for instance, in DK's writings. He's also knotted many of his teachings, and you have to unknot it. And one of the keys that I've revealed to doing so in our esoteric writings is numerology. Therefore, I wrote the book, The Astrological and Numerological Keys to the Secret Doctrine. Now, that was very cumbersome because I didn't necessarily want to go over and over and over again, looking at the number 25 and the number 96 and 88 and 11 and just repeat these. It gets quite boring, cumbersome if you want, to do all of this. But I wanted to reveal the methodology of unknotting some of our esoteric writings. And I used, of course, the Secret Doctrine. When I looked at the Secret Doctrine to write that book, that's the stanzas of Dhyan, the stanzas of meditation, which is written originally ancient stanza, I was shocked because I literally had two versions. One version was from a 6-volume set of the Secret Doctrine, and then there's an earlier version by Blavatsky, 1888 version, and there's probably other versions. So what really happened was that some theosophists back in those days, in the 1930s, and said, oh yeah, I can fix this up. I can fix up Blavatsky's bad grammar in the stanzas and just rearrange a few words. And what they didn't understand is they knocked out the numerical coding. So I started off writing that book some years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. And so I used the newer version, and then I had to rewrite it using the 1888 version because that brings us back to at least what came out of the pen of Blavatsky. So you understand. And so it's this type of problem that all of the great ones have. Now, I'm sure that Guru Rinpoche, when he wrote this, would have also put into his writings a numerical code in Sanskrit, or I think that's what he would have used then, or Tibetan. So there are sacred languages. Now we all know the Kabbalah has got a numerical code to it. The Sanskrit language is the same. It's called Devanagari. In the Sanskrit, it means the gods. It's the language of the gods. But it's all based on sound. And so the numbers relate to that. And then Tibetan is based on Sanskrit. I'm sure if I knew Greek, I'd probably find a numerical coding in the Greek text. Whatever's a sacred language has its numerical coding. And English was turned into a sacred language by Francis Bacon, or we call him Master R. So at that particular time, when he was busy being the Chancellor to Elizabeth R, in that particular Elizabethan age, he also worked out the numerical coding. I've got a 1630 copy of the Bible here in my bookshelf. If you can go back all the way to 1630, it's got a script in it, Robin Burnham, my book, 1660. It's a historic, but in there you've got the F's and the S's. What I'm sort of saying is, if you looked at this English from that particular period of time, is incredibly different to the English now. It's got a lot of extra words. Robert Brooke, would have an E at the end of it. Now we've eliminated the end of that E in modern English. And so the coding had to change also. This is important for me because, for instance, I have a manuscript that's sitting here, another one of these manuscripts, waiting. It's been waiting for decades to be published on the Revelation of St. John, something like 1,000 pages of manuscript, because it's, again, numerically coded. What I'm trying to get to is that the real esoteric philosophy is veiled in symbolism and numbers and allegory and astrological information. That there's these 7 keys, which are explained in my Revelation, and all of that needs to be understood. So the 5 Dhyāni Buddhas, their qualities are veiled in these 5 statements. So this is Ati Yoga, right? You can see this, and with naked perception, somebody with a mind like mine can see this quite clearly. But the average Buddhist reading that, because they've got their form of dogma, their form of belief system, they can't see it that clearly. They're looking at other things. And they don't have that type of perception. First, we have Amoghasiddhi's all-accomplishing wisdom, which is developed by abandoning all constructed teachings. And so the first line is, therefore one should abandon all constructed teachings and all unnatural states free from activity. And this is the all-accomplishing wisdom. So what are constructed teachings? Anything that comes out of the intellect. And all of these schools of Buddhism that we've just talked about, all of that goes in this Ati Yoga. It's just simply the natural state of mind, and all revelations come spontaneously from within. The hint here is that these teachings are representative of the above-mentioned philosophies and yogas, therefore leading one to solely focus upon developing the great perfection, or Ati Yoga. Along this line is found the expression of Ratnasambhava's equalizing wisdom, when all unnatural states, meaning desire mind, samskaras, are to be freed from activity. And that's the second line, the equalizing wisdom of Ratnasambhava. It equalizes it all into a oneness. Evan Wentz's rendering here is, therefore, practicing the Dharma, freed from every attachment, grasp the whole essence of these teachings expressed by the yoga of self-liberation by knowing the mind and its real nature. And of course, this yoga of self-liberation by knowing the mind and its real nature is also the Siddhabhata Todo. And you can see the beauty of this particular enlightened mind, this particular yoga, this particular Tibetan Book of the Dead hierarchy, enlightened beings decided to preserve this, to make it foremost teaching. Any of you sort of know the Kanjor, the Tanjor, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Buddhist books. So many enlightened beings have written books. And so if you go to a Tibetan library and you'll see their books, going up and up, they just have rows and rows and rows of these texts. What I'm getting to is that out of all of that morass, hierarchy, back in those days, the time of Guru Rinpoche, decided to make this text here foremost in the Tibetan mind. How did they do that? it became the ritual. There were lamas who didn't understand the meaning of the words, recited it for 49 days when people died over the deceased. So every lama, every Nyingma lama had a copy of it. They had to have it because people died and they had to use it to recite. They didn't know the meanings except the exoteric meaning. And so the book became very, very prominent and outstanding. It stood above the other teachings. You could go to Kalachakra Tantra, the Uttarattana Tantra, and all the rest, but this one was the one that all the lamas had for the exoteric ritual, which was needed. And everyone in Tibet learned bits of it off by heart because of that. You understand the beauty of this? And then, of course, Evans Wentz, back at the turn of the 19th century, 1930s or whatever, he was there. He found the book, of course, and translated it. Dharmakaya Dazo Sandup, who was also a teacher of Alexander David Neal, then translated it. So voila, on the Western shelves, bookshelves everywhere, one of the earliest books to be published, and which virtually everyone has heard of, is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Then, of course, the reason is that somebody like me came into incarnation and then gave the definitive translation or rendering. I mean, I'm not a translator, but exposition of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, because this is the highest of the teachings. Does it all make sense to you, this form of transmission? And when Guru Rinpoche, in the 800 or so AD, wrote the book, he was thinking far ahead for this time now, then the teachings could be revealed. Likewise, Jesus, he was thinking this period now, when he says go to the upper house, when he had his last supper. And this has got to do with his second coming, so to speak. He really gave it to him, the symbolism of the upper house of the man where they held the supper and all the 12 was there, and the next day he was arrested and whatever. So what I'm trying to say is that all of this sequence is planned out well ahead. The great ones are planning for the future. They're not planning for the now. I mean, the Christians for 2,000 years were looking for the signs of his coming. We're still looking for it now. But you, as a group, have now a much better idea as to the sequence of events than anyone else. Okay, now we're going from the equalizing wisdom, therefore, practice the Dharma, freed from every attachment, grasp the whole essence of the teachings expounded in the yoga of self-liberation by knowing the mind its real nature. And that's the next line, of course, the introduction to awareness, natural liberation through naked perception, which is presented here. Now, this particular attribute relates to Amitabha, the discriminating wisdom of Amitabha. And what is Amitabha? Well, he rules the plane of the mind. The philosophy is literally that associated with mind, and that is Amitabha's domain. And therefore, the title of the book, the proper title, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is the English concept of it, but it's not the actual transliteration of the meaning of the term Bharatoro. It's naked liberation through hearing, through knowing the mind in its real nature. Now, the desire emotions that produce attachment to phenomena must be mastered and completely stilled to generate the harmonizing qualities that equalize all attributes of mind into the one universal flux of mind. Now, this term flux is a good term. You can think of it in terms of fluxual, but it's also a substance that's used if you are welding or trying to join metals together. Often the flux is used, and then it assists in the process of the union of two metals. They have to be in a liquid state, very, very hot. And it's that type of concept of fluxual, of very, very hot, that joins things together into a unity. So one should realize all things in the context of this great natural liberation. And then we come to the development of the discriminated abilities of the mind and the process of its transformation so that the naked perception of the one mind can be gained. And so the naked perception of the one mind is a Amitabha's discriminating inner wisdom, thereby unfolds to produce its corresponding enlightenment. And then we move on in the next statement. The attributes of Akshobhya's mirror-like wisdom follow in the development of this great natural liberation. Here mind is reflected into mind via the śūnyatā mirror. And in my book, Tibetan Books, I point out that śūnyatā acts like a mirror. And finally, we have the great perfection when everything is brought to completion in Vajrayāna's dharmakāya wisdom. And that's the highest of the wisdoms. It's very, very hard to explain exactly what that is, but we got the Dharma and the body of that which contains the Dharma. And if the Dharma is all embracive like the sky, then it's that, the vehicle of that, the wisdom that is the vehicle of that, which is your mind, if you wish, or your head center fully awakened. The entire process and vastness of the ocean of virtuous mind is then sealed by the tantric pledge to master the demonstration of this wisdom. Thus the use of the mantra samaya nya nya nya. You see basically that for all of us Westerners, we don't really make these pledges on the whole. Some of us do. A lot of people out there make a pledge trying to make themselves mountains of money. And they do everything they can to possibly make themselves a huge fortune. And that's that pledge, samaya. I'm not going to do anything else but make money, make money. And then there's other types of pledges people do. But for us Buddhists, we're making pledges to obtain this dharmakaya wisdom, this vast, vast, vast ocean of space, ocean of mind, level after level of it. And we don't cease striving until that's obtained. And that's the bodhisattva path or the initiation path or whatever terminology we want to use to get there. This, as I said, Buddhism in this particular book, it's all about mind. And as I said, I use the small mind and the capital, small letter M and the capital letter M, two different types of mind in my writings. And sometimes when I'm just talking about the intellect per se, or the empirical mind, I use a small mind, and I'm talking about the enlightened mind, and I capitalize it. And it makes it my writings tricky. My writings are very tricky because I'm introducing a much more complexity to the text that's not in other books. And then I have to use sometimes a small m and big M together because I'm talking about the whole vastness, all levels of it. And often it's the same capitalization. Do we use a small s for space or a big S for space? And we sort of are talking about deity. We're going now to the analysis proper starts with the sections entitled Synonyms of Mind. So up till now, all we've been doing is getting to what the book's really about. And the book is about mind. And the text begins. These are all the levels of looking at what mind is. It's wonderful, isn't it? Analysis of mind. That's all what you are, really. As for this apparent and distinct phenomena, which is called mind, in terms of existence, it has no inherent existence whatsoever. Now that's something for everyone to ponder with. No inherent existence whatsoever, yet everything is mind. In terms of origination, it is the source of the diverse joys and sorrows of psychic existence and nirvana. And here we've got psychic existence and nirvana. It's not just samsara, not just the source of samsara, it's also the source of nirvana, or śūnyatā if you want, the two truths, the source of both. Mind is beyond śūnyatā. In terms of philosophical opinion, it is subject to opinions in accordance with the 11 vehicles. In terms of designation, it has an inconceivable number of distinct names. Some call it the nature of mind itself, Some eternalists give it the name self. Pious attendants, now he's talking about now the various Buddhist schools. Pious attendants call it selflessness of the individual. Chittamatrans call it mind. Some call it perfection of discriminative awareness. Some call it the nucleus of the Sugata, or the Tathagata Garbha, which is what they're referring to here. Some call it the Great Seal, which is in Buddhism called Mahamudra. Some call it the unique seminal point, which is called Bindu. Some call it the expanse of reality. Some call it the ground of all. Some call it ordinary, unfabricated consciousness. Of course, when I'm reading all of this out, I understand we're looking at somebody's translation of Tibetan terms. So I'm not a Tibetan scholar of Tibetan writing, so I have to go with the translations. And all of you understand that there are different translators that look at a word and can translate it with different nuances. And I'm looking at the particular translation of one author that I use, and then I'm also looking at that translation that came through Evans Wentz's book. And then I also used another translation. So I had three sources, but Gurmi is the one I'm using here, so it's his translation. The structure of this entire passage must be analysed to derive proper meaning. And then I say first there's the opening passage plus 4 sentences to start with the phrase in terms of. So when you get an open passage and then you get 4, now in Buddhism, you're beginning to understand that there's numbers to everything. 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Ālayavijñānas, they love numbers. And when you got this 4 plus 1, and you get the 5, that relates then to the 5 sense consciousnesses, the pentad, which is the foundation of mind. And so when you're analyzing, you have to look at numbers, the numerical coding in Tibetan writings, because everything is number. This is of significance because the 5 phrases refer to the originating source of all that can be considered mind in nature, namely the 5 Dhyāni Buddhas. The first statement presented is, as for this apparent and distinct phenomenon, which is called mind, Evans Wentz provides here that which is commonly called mind is of intuitive wisdom, literally quick knowing. And there's a term then called prajna. Quick knowing is the intuition. As this analysis concerns the sum total of phenomena called mind, our focus is upon the emanational quality wisdom of the jina. Now, the term jina in Sanskrit is normally a shorthand for any of the 5 Dhyāni Buddhas, but sometimes it refers to a Buddha such as Gautama. But normally it's a term for Dhyāni Buddhas. That embodies this totality. This is the one mind that embraces the whole of samsara nirvana, namely Virachana, and the Dharmadhatu wisdom, who sits at the center of the mandala of the jinas. So you get the 1 and the 4. Literally, when you think of the swastika and the movement of the swastika and the 4 arms of the swastika, the Dharmadhatu wisdom is the very center. And then the 4 arms, the rest of the Dhyāni Buddhas, depending on whether you're going to the north, south, east, west, but of course the arms of the Vajra, or the Visvavajra, or the swastika, are the same, normally at intermediate position. Well, anyway, there's 2 types of swastikas. One that's oriented north, south, east, west, and the other's in the intermediate, and one's masculine and the other one's feminine in relationship to each other. So you can see all this philosophy is incredibly pregnant, detailed. It's actually quite beautiful when you really get into it, because the whole philosophy, it's been created by lots of enlightened minds working to produce the beauty of the overall package over time. Okay, so Virachana sits at the center of the mandala. Those who can emulate Virachana, therefore, also come to embody this quick knowing, thus instantaneous prajna. The term prajna, or Tibetan sherab, means enlightened knowledge, analytical wisdom, and discriminative awareness. This wisdom is the expression of the universal mind. A liberated one who resides in the Dharma Dhatu utilizes this mind to organize the ālayavijñāna, via which those ensnared in samsara can be awakened. Now, all of you know samsara, and now we get into the ālayavijñāna. Vijnana is almost the same as prajna, it's mind, or discriminative mind, and laya is something like storehouse of. And basically, ālayavijñāna is the storehouse of mind, all aspects of mind. I give the term, the third initiation is the ālayavijñāna initiation, because I'm looking at the higher mental plane as the store of mind, but it actually incorporates all of the 7 planes, subplanes of mind. The second statement presented is, in terms of existence, it has no inherent existence whatsoever. This perspective is from the eastern direction of the mandala of the Dhyāni Buddhas. Here we find Akshobhya's mirror-like wisdom. Existence and non-existence are thereby reflections that mirror each other. The meditative insight gained by comprehending the true nature of phenomena derives from the mind contain everything considered existence by those ensnared by the whole of samsara, because everything in samsara is transient, fleeting. Therefore, things have no inherent existence or lasting permanence that such an existence would convey. Now, here's again, if you want, the difference between śūnyatā, which we call the 2 truths, and samsara. The samsara has no lasting permanence. And therefore, in Buddhism, it's called foundationless. It's transient. You can't hang on to it. We all do. Women like to hang on to their beauty. Men like to hang on to their hair or whatever. We like to hang on to money or our possessions. And, when you hang on to it hard enough and long enough, and when it starts to go, you fade, you get old, your health goes, war happens like in Ukraine, and you lose everything. This is samsara. And when you hang on to stuff transient, then you're going to get pain and suffering when it goes. And we all know the experience, right? The opposite to that is śūnyatā. It's something that is stable. I wrote in one of my books about śūnyatā. Because it is stable, then it allows the entire universe to exist. Universe can't exist if there's nothing stable. That which is cyclic can only manifest because it can hang on to something and from which it can go into and out of. So there's something that must be, that allows the transience to be absorbed into, then come from again. In physics, they call it the event horizon. And so physics has got the same concept. Atoms, quark, they're going in and out of the event horizon all the time. Even the concept of black holes are the same. There's an event horizon at the edge of a black hole. Inside the black hole, it's black space. Nothing can leave. Something in that black hole, they say, is the center of every sun or universe or galaxy, because it's the stable thing that holds everything together, the ultimate source of gravity, if you want. And śūnyatā is the same in the philosophy. It's empty because samsara can't exist in it, but it's that from which samsara comes and then absorbed again. In terms of existence, it has no inherent existence whatsoever. We're talking about mind, of course, because if mind is identified with samsara, it's got no existence. We identify with samsara, we give it name. This is a book, all sorts of names to things of samsara, but their inherent existence doesn't exist. The book is not going to last a book forever. It can be consumed in a fire, rot away, whatever. Because everything in samsara is transient, fleeting, therefore things have no inherent existence or lasting permanence that such an existence would convey. From this statement then would be derived the doctrine of the 2 truths, which I've just been talking about, the samsara, śūnyatā interrelationship. And in my writings, I talk about the nexus between the two, and that's the ultimate truth, is the nexus. the place from whence samsara originates and into which samsara goes. And those of you, that's where you're learning to sit in your meditative absorption between this phenomenal world and that internal world. And when you sit there, then you can know the nature of appearing a phenomena and its disappearance in its totality, the śūnyatā samsara nexus. Anyway, I explained this in volume 1 of my treatise in mind. There's the relative truth containing the nature phenomena, and also the absolute truth of the ultimate nature of śūnyatā. Here the focus is upon the absolute truth gained by the meditative insight of the mind's eye, resting in the void that is the heart's embrace. This is, again, something for all of you to understand, that the void, śūnyatā, at the very heart of the heart center is a disc, if you wish, of śūnyatā. And you've got the 12 petals of the heart center, which relate to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And we've gone into this before. And you know that the heart center is the basis of love wisdom. And then we're talking about the blue. Now, that blue, which Tentai's experience, and she's trying to explain it, and it's very hard to explain, that's śūnyatā, or the essence of that is śūnyatā. It's spaciousness, it's everything, and yet it's nothing. Do you want to try explaining that experience?
I don't know if I can. Honestly, Bodo, it is incredibly difficult. As you are saying, from my experience, it's like a mirror. It feels like there is actually nothing there, but until you find that actual, that blue energy that's residing there. I don't know that I can actually do any better than that. I mean, I wrote a few notes, but I don't think they're anything more than what you've already given. It's only something that you can actually feel is the only thing that I can say. Words don't actually assist. It didn't assist me in reading anything until I felt it. And then it's within. I don't express things as well as you do.
You can see the problem here with these Buddhists. They've got the same experience, but how do you use words?
The one thing that at some point that I thought to myself, I thought it's almost like I'm just like a set of eyes, just looking outwards. It's just without any thought, again, like you said, it's like a dog barking, really.
So there's the mirror-like wisdom, and the eyes looking every which way is the mirror. It reflects whatever it sees out into space. And then the mouth opens and the harsh voice comes out to try to explain whatever you've experienced.